सन्न्यासध्यात्मचेतसा
निराशीर्निर्ममो भूत्वा
निराशीर्निर्ममो बुद्ध्वा
युध्यस्व विकटज्वरः।
युध्यस्व विगडज्वरः
मयि सर्वाणि कर्माणि
मयि सर्वाणि कर्माणि
सन्न्यस्यध्यात्मचेतसा।
सन्न्यस्यध्यात्मचेतसा
निराशीर्निर्ममो भूत्वा
निराशीर्निर्ममो बुद्ध्वा
युध्यस्व विकटज्वरः।
युध्यस्व विगडज्वरः
If anybody wants to recite the verse.
Anybody would like to recite? Saket, Anil ji? Yeah, you can recite this verse, Sloka?
Yes, teacher.
Yeah.
मयि सर्वाणि कर्माणि सन्न्यास्याध्यात् निराशीर्निर्ममो भूत्वा युध्यस्व विगतज्वरः.
Very good, very good. How about Raghav? Raghav mother?
Okay, sir. My सर्वाणि कर्माणि Bhagavad Gita 3.30. My सर्वाणि कर्माणि सन्न्यासाध्यात्मचेतसा निराशीर्निर्ममो भूत्वा युध्यस्व विकटज्वरः.
Very good, very good. Anil ji?
Oh yeah, I can try. Mai sarvani karmani sanyasa yasa sanyasa nirsir nirmamo bhutva
Yudhyasva vigadajvaraha.
yuddhasva vikajachvala.
Raghav mother, you want to go?
Yes, sir. Hare Krishna. Bhagavad Gita 3.30. मयि सर्वाणि कर्माणि सन्न्यस्य याध्यात्मचेतसा निराशे निर्मनो भूत्वा युद्धस्व विगतज्वर.
Okay. Vivek ji, you would like to, or anybody else?
I'll try after that. I'll practice.
Okay, okay, no problem.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Okay. So Prabhu, you can take over.
Okay, thank you. Mayi,
Mayi,
unto me, Sarvani,
Sarvani,
all sorts of Karmani, activities,
Sanyasya,
giving up completely,
Adhyatma,
with full knowledge of the self, Chetasa, by consciousness, Nirasihi, without the desire for profit, Nirmamaha, without ownership, Bhutva, so being, Yudhyasva, fight, Vigadajvaraha, without being lethargic. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me, with full knowledge of me, without desire for profit, with no claims to proprietorship, and free from lethargy, fight. So, purport. This verse clearly indicates the purpose of Bhagavad Gita. The Lord instructs that one has to become fully Krishna conscious to discharge the duties as if in military discipline. Such an injunction may make the things a little difficult. Nevertheless, duties must be carried out with the dependence on Krishna because that is the constitutional position of the living entity. The living entity cannot be happy independent of the cooperation of the Supreme Lord because the eternal constitution of the living entity is to become subordinate to the desires of the Lord. Arjuna was therefore ordered by Sri Krishna to fight as if the Lord were his military commander. One has to sacrifice everything for the goodwill of the Supreme Lord and at the same time discharge prescribed duties without claiming proprietorship. Arjuna did not have to consider the order of the Lord, he only had to execute his order. The Supreme Lord is the soul of all souls. Therefore, one who depends solely and wholly on the Supreme Soul without personal consideration, or in other words, one who is fully Krishna conscious, is called Adhyatma Chetas. Nirasihi means one who means that one has to act on the order of the master but should not expect fruitive results. The cashier may count millions of dollars for his employer, but he does not claim a cent for himself. Similarly, one has to realize that nothing in this world belongs to any individual person, but everything belongs to the Supreme Lord. That is the real purport of Mai or unto me. And when one acts in Krishna consciousness, certainly he does not claim proprietorship over anything. This consciousness is called nirmama or nothing is mine. And if there is any reluctance to execute such a stern order, which is without consideration of so-called kinsmen in the bodily relationship, that reluctance should be thrown off. In this way, one may become vigatachvaraha or without feverish mentality or lethargy. Everyone, according to his quality and position, has a particular type of work to discharge, and all such duties may be discharged in Krishna consciousness as described above. That will lead one to the path of liberation. Om Ajnanatimirānandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sahrujatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitantam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Shri Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mai sarvani karmani sanyasyatma chetasa nirashir nirmamo bhutva yudhyasva vikadachvaraha. Therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me, with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, with no claims to proprietorship, and free from lethargy, fight. So, in this verse, we are seeing the continuation of Krishna's instructions on how to perform an activity in full Krishna consciousness. In fact, this is the first time that he brings Krishna consciousness into the equation, because prior to this, Krishna was mainly talking about how to carry out an activity and without expecting anything in return, basically. But also, he also talked about the fact how that one should not act for one's sense gratification or for expecting something in return. Then in the previous verse in 329, he talks about the fact that when the people who do not understand that they carry out the activities, the voice should not unsettle them. So now Krishna is giving a very detailed instruction on how exactly to go about it. And Prabhupada very nicely explains that in the purport. So Krishna says, how can one come to that platform? He talks about 4 different aspects in this verse. First, he says, surrender all your activities, all your work to me. Then he says, become fully knowledgeable of me. Then the third thing is, carry out this work without having any desire for profit and without any claim of proprietorship. And lastly, without being lethargic. So there are 4 different aspects that Krishna talks about how we can actually engage in this work. Because this is, so generally we always see that we are inclined to work for our own whatever we want. And especially when somebody says to us, oh, you can do this, but you will not get anything in return, then automatically almost our enthusiasm for doing that work comes down to zero. We feel that this is not something worth doing. Or if you are forced to do it, you just do it because you have to do it. We don't do it with any enthusiasm. Whereas Krishna actually talks about without any lethargy. That means we have to do our work and we have to do it with full enthusiasm. And in fact, enthusiasm is the first aspect of how we can progress in Krishna consciousness. Without enthusiasm, we can never progress. And therefore, this is the first base that Krishna covers over here, saying that fight without lethargy. So generally we see that people are of obviously different natures. Somebody may be very much in the mode where one is very, very cautious. That means one doesn't want to put a foot out without examining all the different things. And therefore what happens is, it is almost like that person never carries out anything because he's so cautious about things. And the second aspect is on the exact opposite of that, is a person who is very reckless. He just goes out and does everything without consideration of any matter. But in either case, the actions performed may not be proper because the aspect is one of trying to have proprietorship. That means it is, I want to do this and I want to get a result out of this. That proprietorship and enjoyership of that is there. But Krishna again is saying, get rid of both. Don't claim that you are doing this work for yourself. Do this as a work done for me, so that you do not expect anything in return. And then therefore you can come out of that very, very much, because when we are doing something for Krishna's pleasure, we know that Krishna is not actually looking at the result of that activity. Krishna is looking at what efforts we put in. Just like, let's say, the child is there and the child knows that their parents' birthday is coming up. Then the child, if it goes out and tries to create a nice greeting card on its own, however it is imperfect it may be, the parent is very happy when they receive that greeting card, because they are not worried about the quality of the result. What they are in fact looking at is the effort that the child has put in to give that card. And what does that show? That shows the love the child has for the parent. And Krishna is exactly the same. So Krishna is not looking at what result our activities take. As long as we put in our efforts with full enthusiasm for serving Krishna, Krishna is satisfied. And therefore he is giving the direction here that do not claim any proprietorship over your activity, nor the next aspect that he talks about is that you do not have any profit for yourself. That means you do it as a service unto Krishna, but not for the self. So in this way, you can do this activity without getting any anxiety over the result, and also fully satisfying Krishna's Krishna's senses by that activity. And Krishna is very pleased just by what aspect, what endeavor we put in, the enthusiasm with which we carry out. And then the aspect prior to that, he says, is also that you surrendering all your works unto me. So why? So previously, karma, we know, is performance of any activity, and we already discussed previously that karma could be three things. Karma meaning that which is authorized in the scriptures. Akarma means that which is done as an offering to Krishna without, therefore, which does not carry any reactions to it. And vikarma means that which is prohibited in the scriptures. Therefore, here Krishna is saying, even when you are doing any karma, any activity, you give that up unto me. Why? Because every activity that is otherwise performed is binding on the individual. So we saw this previously in the, sorry, I'm just pulling out the reference. Because in 3.9, Krishna says, work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work causes bondage in this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform the prescribed duties for his satisfaction, and in this way, you will remain free from bondage. So, Krishna clearly mentions that one has to perform work. And in fact, prior to that, he says that perform your prescribed duty. For doing so is better than not working. One cannot even maintain one's physical body without work. So the aspect is that as an individual, we can never be without actually working. Therefore, it is impossible for us to shut down completely. And therefore, we need to engage. And if we engage in activities and which are offered as a service to Krishna, then there is no reactions there. And finally, Krishna says that you perform this activity by having complete knowledge of me. So in this verse, he says, Adhyatma Chetasa, with full knowledge of the self and by consciousness. That is, by engaging in an activity in which we understand our true constitutional position, meaning that we are servants of the Supreme Lord. We are part and parcel of the Supreme, but we are servants. We are not in any way significant vis-a-vis the Supreme. Yes, in quality, we have oneness with the Supreme. So we are also Satchidananda, and the Supreme Lord is also Satchidananda. So the qualitative oneness remains. But our quantity is minuscule, whereas the Supreme Lord is boundless. He's so huge. So therefore, we can never be compared to him. And therefore, the only way in which we can derive true bliss is if we are actually aligned with Krishna's desires. If we have desires which are of our own, which is primarily means that we want to satisfy ourselves, then we will not be actually be able to engage with we will not be able to engage in Krishna's service as such, because we want everything for ourselves. So even when we try to do something, it is always on a transactional platform, meaning I will do this for you so that I can get something in return. That is not the mood. when we truly understand that we are a servant of the Supreme Lord, we want to do something for Krishna because we love him. See, in the olden days, the servant did not used to work for the master for a payment of a fee. The servant was very loyal to the master, and he will do everything for the master, and the master in turn will make sure that the servant is well protected and well provided for. There is no need for any agreement of actual a fee for the service that is being rendered. That is the true nature of the master and the servant. Whereas in today's world, when we talk about master and servant, is that before even the work is commenced, you agree, okay, you do this and I will give you this. That is the arrangement that is made. There is never the true loyalty between of the servant to the master, nor is the master actually taking control and providing and protecting the servant. That is never happening. Whereas in the olden days, that's how exactly it used to happen. Like the the persons who used to serve the king did so because of their loyalty to the king, and the king made sure that all of his persons who are under his care were also well maintained and cared for. And that is the way that whole thing was maintained. So if we look at this and say, okay, this is Krishna's instruction to Arjuna, but then we look back at how Krishna reinforces this in chapter 18. Chapter 18 is basically a kind of summary of all of the instructions of the Gita. And if we see this in chapter 18, Krishna talks about this aspect of duty and service so much, especially in the last part between verses 47 to 60. He talks quite a bit. So in 47, he says, it is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. Duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reactions. So what is Krishna saying here? He is saying that based on our constitutional, how we are by nature, what we can do. In the olden days, that's how determined our Varna and Ashrama. Varna meaning what qualities we possess determined the kind of work that we used to do. So whilst they were families, but still the families provided an atmosphere for that person to continue in that same Varna. So a person born in a Brahmin family would always have that ability to acquire similar qualities and carry on as a Brahmana. However, if it was identified that he did not possess those qualities to actually become a Brahmana, he was then directed by the spiritual master to take on a different role. It does not mean that one taking on a role determined his status in society. No, one taking on a role determined by one's propensity to carry out a particular propensity to carry out actions in a particular mood. And therefore, it was always how the spiritual masters directed their disciples to work. So usually the thing was that when a person was born in a Brahmin family, because of how they looked after themselves in a very sattvic way, the children would also carry similar sort of mood, and therefore they would continue in that line. In that same way, the person who is born in a Kshatriya family would also do as well. Therefore, a person who is born in a Kshatriya family should not think, oh, the Brahmanas are so venerated because they are very calm, they are very collected, that they can give advice, they are in a better position than me. Therefore, I should give up my activity of being a Kshatriya and take up the Brahmanas position. That would not work, because the innate nature would automatically come out at some point of time. like it, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this thing, that once there was a jackal. The jackal thought that the lion is the king and everybody respects him. If somehow or another I became the king, then everybody would respect me. And therefore, he tried to develop a voice similar to the lion. And he thought just by imitating the lion's voice that he would become. But he could never really imitate. And therefore, even when he clothed himself in a lion's skin and tried to behave like a lion, he could never be that. And the other animals always found out. He thought, this is not working. So I better try and see if I can become something unique that none of these people really know who I am. So in this way, it was thinking, and it was walking around, and somehow it fell into a big vat, meaning a big container containing all different kinds of dyes, and it fell into one in which it was made of a violet dye. When it jumped, somehow fell in, and then somebody pulled it out of it and took it away. So it was prevented from being killed by falling into the vat. But still, because it was in that, it had all this violet color. And this violet color is not something that is usually found. So now it thought itself, oh, I have got this color and I'm completely unique and something very different. So I can now use this to my advantage. And so what it did was that it went to the forest and told the animals, see, there is going to be a big disaster coming, and I have been sent by God to protect you all. So you should all respect me. And nobody had seen somebody in that violet color in that way. So all the animals thought, oh, this must be true. Therefore, we should follow what he is saying. And in this way, they started following him. And the jackal was very much happy that others were following him. And in this way, it carried on. But one night, all the jackals in the forest started wailing. And this jackal who was in that violet thing as well, he could never control, because all the other jackals were wailing. He also started wailing. As soon as they heard this jackal also wailing, all the animals understood that this is the jackal, this is not what it is. And therefore they then pounced on him and literally killed him. So this shows, underneath whatever changes we may try to make externally, our internal nature has a strong predominance, and we cannot give up that predominance very easily. And that is why Krishna says that it is better to perform one's own duty, even imperfectly, than trying to perform somebody else's duty perfectly. And what does this mean? This does not mean that we should not take up the process of Krishna consciousness, though, because that is the original process. And the thing is that our nature is actually impelled by the three modes of material nature: sattva, rajas, and tamas. That is goodness, passion, and ignorance. And these have an impact. And what does this mean? And this is why Krishna says further down in text 48, he says, every endeavor is covered by some fault, just as fire is covered by smoke. Therefore, one should not give up the work born out of his nature, even if such work is full of fault. So this is the point that Arjuna was trying to do over there. At the start in chapter 1, he was trying to say, oh, what will happen if I kill my own kinsman? What will happen if I kill my own grandfather and my spiritual master? There will be sins accruing to me. What he was not thinking is, what is his proper duty to do? What is the proper basis for him to act on? Without thinking that, he was making things as though he's a very learned person, as though he is the person who is actually in the mode of being a Brahmana, who is able to interpret and say. But what he was not looking at is, what is his position? His position is that of a Kshatriya. And a Kshatriya's position is to fight for the dharma. And in this case, he was actually looking to give up his fighting aspect, that is the duty of a Kshatriya, to take up the dharmic aspect of a higher thing that he is trying to make of that of a Brahmana. And therefore, Krishna is saying that is not possible. So here, clearly, therefore, in this verse, he is saying, you do everything, but do all those actions, you surrender to me. You don't claim proprietorship. You don't think that you are the person who is actually acting in the battlefield. You don't think that the gain or the loss that is going to come out of this battle is yours. Give all that up and just fight with full enthusiasm for me. That is what is Krishna's instruction. Of course, the other aspect that we have to understand is this is but a step in Krishna consciousness. This is amongst the lower steps in Krishna consciousness. The first step is to understand what is dharma and what is to be done. The next step is to act in dharma, which is what is karma yoga all about. Then nishkama karma yoga is giving up everything and acting. Then above that, but still what we don't know at that point is, whom are we acting this for? What is it that we are doing? Therefore, we have to go the next step up of the knowledge of trying to understand what or who is that supreme? Why are we acting? How we are to do it? So that becomes knowledge. But still, acquisition of that knowledge is not sufficient. Above that is then comes the meditation or dhyana yoga, by which one actually meditates on the supreme and understands the relationship. And then finally in bhakti yoga, one goes to the platform of actually serving that supreme Lord. So here we see that 330, when we talk about this, this is at the lowest level of the whole process of the yoga ladder. And therefore, here what Krishna is saying is very, the basic. But when we develop all this, this is how Prabhupada very nicely does in the purport, that ultimately when a person understands that everything has to be done for Krishna and that nothing is his, and therefore he realizes the position of Krishna and carries out all the activities in Krishna consciousness without expecting in return, on the basis of his love for Krishna, then he comes to the highest process. And in this way he can do it. And that will be described by Krishna further on in this chapter and into the next, as to how that one can get that knowledge and carry out his activities. So this is what I had in terms of this particular verse. So if others have any comments, questions, please do.
Anybody have any suggestions, feedbacks, questions? Yes, Vivek ji, go ahead. Yes, sir.
No, nothing. What was the sloka number, and the, can we have it see again and once again?
Sorry, the sloka that we looked at today is 3rd chapter, 30th verse.
No, the explanation part once again. So can
you share, Prabhuji?
Sorry?
Can you share the sloka?
Yeah, sure. Can you see the translation now?
Yes. Thank you, sir. Just wanted to read.
Yes, Saket, you have a question, Saket? You can go ahead and ask.
Further in Bhagavad Gita,
Sakit cannot hear you well.
for me,
Yeah.
Is all the yoga ladder in Bhagavad Gita?
Yes, all these will be described by Krishna going forward. Yes.
Okay.
All these ladders lead to Bhakti Yoga.
Bhakti yoga is the all encompassing of everything.
Okay, teacher.
Step by step process. See, there are two things. You have in your apartment, you can see the stairs, right? And also you can see the lift.
Yes.
So Krishna give you a choice. You want to take a lift or you want to take the staircase? Which you prefer?
The lift.
Yes. So your bhakti is a direct process. Krishna is telling you no need to go through all the other steps. You just do loving devotional service. That is the lift. Whereas you can come step by step, starting from karma yoga.
Okay.
Okay, so you can come step by step, go up, and the final stage is bhakti yoga. There, once you reach there, then you get a love to God.
Okay, teacher.
Sorry, Prabhuji.
No, absolutely. Very nice explanation.
Yes. So is it clear, Saki?
Yes, teacher.
Okay. So Prabhuji, can I have a question? Sorry.
Sure, absolutely, Prabhu.
Okay. So basically, you mentioned that one has to do his job. Actually, Krishna mentioned in the last sloka of this third chapter, if I am not wrong. The one's own duty, do their own duty is much imperfectly is better than doing others' duty. So
Yeah.
how one know what is my own duty?
Okay. So this is where the issue arises in today's world versus how things were in the past. In the past, the whole society was properly arranged because of how they carried out the various things right from birth. So in the olden days, that as I said, when a person is born into a family, he did not automatically become based on that. He was then advised to take up a particular path or activity, set of activities based on his nature. And then, if, since similar to that, everybody was being advised. So all of the society took up path based on that advice. So everybody's activities then became complementary to each other. Whereas in today's world, if we choose based on that, but everybody else is not doing, we would not be able to execute our act properly. So that is why in this day and age, that actually carrying out varnashrama based on the earlier aspect is not that advised. So therefore, one has to take to the path of devotional service. And that path is made very easy through the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Thereby, one engages in service. One engaging in service to Krishna based on one's nature, that is better rather than trying to figure out what one should do in terms of a varna or a class of work that one should be performing. How does one understand what work to do in Krishna consciousness? Is very simple. It is that activity that you can perform endlessly without input from somebody else and without feeling that I have to do this. When somebody tells you that you have to do this, we might engage and do it, but that may not result in self-satisfaction. But if we, out of our own love, that this is an activity that I can do and keep on doing it. For some, it might be doing kirtan. For some, it could be doing deity worship. For some, it could be doing book distribution. For others, it could be just cooking for Krishna. For others, it could be just maintaining a very clean atmosphere of Krishna's place. Whatever it is, all of this, Krishna is satisfied. Krishna is not going to think, oh, the pujari who comes and does service at my altar, he is the greatest. The person who is cleaning my room, he is the worst. No, Krishna does not see the variation between that. Krishna looks at the effort and the intention. And therefore, we need to figure out that activity which keeps us engaged without us feeling that, oh, I have been engaged to do this. That feeling should never come. That with which we can engage ourselves practically endlessly. That is the one that goes with our nature. Of course, see, the spiritual master will be able to guide us ideally because they know, they have a better knowledge of how to engage the soul in Krishna consciousness, and they will be able to give. But that is one of the aspects to look at, because, and if that is not done, just like in anything else, we will feel the burnout over time. Like if we are doing things which are not aligned with our nature, we will not be able to consistently engage in that for a long period of time. Does that satisfy you, Prabhu?
Yeah, thanks, Prabhuji. Thanks a lot. It's understood. So whatever activity which don't give us the thing which I am doing as a burden for me, then that is the one. It's my own passion of duty.
Yes. As I said, the thing is that we need to engage in that with our total heart in it, and we should be able to engage in it for a long period of time, and that would be able, which we will be able to sustain. And usually the spiritual master is able to identify that very easily based on our interactions and based on how we actually serve or do things, and therefore they usually give instructions which lead us on that path.
So basically, you want to say that the whatever we do, our intention is always try to be a good.
It is not, see, good and bad is based on what is there in this material world.
No, but sometimes we have to do just to do something good, but end of that it's worst. So that, but our intention is good. We don't want to disturb someone. So what is our, when we are confused, then who will tell us that is your duty, not this one?
That's what I said. So the spiritual master is ideally placed to understand our nature and give us the right direction. Unless we take to a spiritual master, it is very difficult for us, because on our own, all our activities are anyway covered by the three modes of material nature. So therefore, that clouds our thinking as well. In our clouded thinking, we will not be able to make up the thing. Of course, if we are more situated in the mode of goodness, we can make out the differences. Just as how Krishna says, in the mode of goodness, all our internal senses are enlightened completely, and therefore we are able to see things as they are. And in that state, we are able to understand. But we are never able to stay situated in that way all the while. So therefore, we can make judgments very differently. But the spiritual master can understand really the nature of that individual, and he can direct him in the right course of action, that which will ensure that their service to Krishna can remain uninterrupted, and they guide them. So that is the best way. So that is why, see, as we go through, so what we are currently looking at is just activity. The next aspect of it, as I said, this is the step, is what is there is looking at activity. Then comes the next step of knowledge. Then comes the next step of meditation, and then comes the step of devotional service. And in devotional service, we understand that we have to serve Krishna not only because he is the Supreme Lord. But because he is so compassionate towards us, that he is actually doing everything possible for us to come back to him. And it is us to actually transfer our attention to him and do activities which will satisfy him. And when we come to that, it is like, see, when the child is small, the whatever be the amount of attention that the parent gives, or whatever the amount of love the parent gives, the child does not fully comprehend the full nature of it. But when that same child becomes a parent, then they understand what the parent was doing at that time. And they are able to, in that same way, unless we are under the guidance of somebody who has gone through this path, the spiritual master, who is then able to give us that knowledge and tell us this is the way we have to do, we will not really do. But of course, we can persevere and try and find out. But then it could mean that we are going into so many dead zones. Like we'll go on one path, find out, oh, that does not work for me, come back. Go into another, come back. Go into another, come back. We might try a lot of different things. But because it's all in devotional service, we are not losing anything. But our ability to find that particular aspect that keeps us always engaged is going to be a path of trial and error and ultimately finding it. But going to the spiritual master, he will be able to direct us. Okay, you take this path, it will be the most beneficial for you.
So, but sorry, Prabhu.
Sure.
So the thing is, this material world, see, there is nothing spiritual activities are there. Yes, of course, there is a certain, unless one is trying to engage.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, what a person, he is not fully in the spiritual world, or he don't have a spiritual master, what he can, what is the best he can do?
See, until we gain a spiritual master, the best way is to at least try and follow instructions given in general by the realized souls. A spiritual master is one when we decide, okay, here is a person whom I can take instructions and forever execute it without any questions. That is taking up that aspect. But until then, one can take instructions, or one can look at the instructions which have been provided by the realized souls and try to execute based on that. That is why we have got, that's why Prabhupada said, like, even if one reads one verse of Bhagavad Gita and is able to actually implement that, he will get over everything, because his potency is implemented into the words that he has spoken and written. So that when we take those instructions and try to execute them in simply by saying, okay, here is a person who has truly understood, and therefore I am willing to follow that instruction and try and get along that same path, then they will get that benefit. Of course, it is like having a temporary connection to your house. When you're building your house, you get a temporary electricity connection or a temporary water connection. That is not going to be there. That cannot actually satisfy all your needs when the house is completed. In that same way, yes, this is that initial step we take, but we need that permanent connection established, which is through taking a living guru. Prabhupada himself said, a living guru is very important because he can correct us then and there. Otherwise, even when we take these instructions and read, our mind can interpret it in variety of ways. And that may not be the exact way that the book, in the person actually instructed. That is why a living guru is very much important. Yes, in the initial start, it can help get us on to the path. But ultimately, we need a living guru to actually hold our hand to move faster down.
Thanks, Prabhuji. Thanks. Anybody have any other questions? Any feedbacks? Anilji, Sriram?
Clear, clear, clear. Yeah.
Okay. So the key message is, as Krishna mentioned, we have to surrender ourselves fully to Krishna.
As I said, this chapter, because it's based on Karma Yoga, he's talking about surrendering our activities to him. So this is at that lower end of the scale. Still not coming to that full extent of surrendering
surrendering.
everything that we have unto him.
So that is where today the materialistic peoples are. So at least whatever we do, we make it as a service to Krishna.
Yes, exactly. Like, see, the point is what we can do is we can at least make them understand that all the qualities that they have that is actually coming from Krishna, and therefore in return we need to serve him, and through that somehow engage them in Krishna's service. And then by that they get something, which is that Ajnana Sukriti that they get, which is that mercy that flows from Krishna and the devotees, which then somehow or another, whether in this life or in the future, will take them on to the path of Bhakti Yoga ultimately.
Okay, thanks, Prabhuji. I think it is too late for you. Thank you very much for giving this very nice class. If no question, I think that's all we have for today. Is it everyone okay? We can wind up the session. Okay, thank you, Prabhuji. Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thanks
Krishna
for
to you
everyone
all.
for coming.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. And